Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Okay, maybe someone can wave at me just to confirm that you can hear me okay. We're also live on our Facebook page. You can also watch this webinar there. So as soon as I get confirmation from some of you that the sound is okay, I can start the webinar. So you can use the options that you have in your screen, in the Zoom webinar screen, at the button. You can ask questions using the Q&A features, and you can also wave, raise your hand, something like that. So perfect. I saw a sign, a confirmation. That's all good. We can start with this demonstration of how to create experiments. I will share the screen, and that's how we will interact for the rest of our webinar. Everything is going to be on the browser so that I can show you the main features of Testable, or the features that are related to creating experiments in Testable. Feel free to ask me any questions using the Zoom webinar. At any point, I will check from time to time to see whether there are some questions outstanding, and I will answer them during the webinar. Okay, so after you create an account with Testable and you sign in, you will be taken to this space here. Obviously, if it's your first time in Testable, this space is going to be empty. You're not going to have any projects. Otherwise, all your projects will be here. To create a new project, the best thing is to use the option of Quick Project. If you click on the Quick Project here, you'll be taken to this natural language form. And here, you can use this to define how your experiment should look like, how your trials should look like. So you can select between the different stimuli type, if you plan to present images, words, sounds, or videos, how many stimuli per trial. If you select images, you need to select the format as well, between JPEG, PNG, BMP, and GIF. You need to say whether you'd like the images to be presented simultaneously or sequentially. Note that if I change this to sequentially, then the subsequent options change as well, because now I need to define how many screens I want, what's the presentation time for each screen, what's the interstimulus interval, and so on. So in the getting ready with Testable, we started with a very basic example of a simultaneous presentation. Let's go for a sequential presentation this time. 2 screens, 1 second each, let's say, interstimulus interval 500 milliseconds, and no mask in between. Let's add a text above the stimuli, maybe instructions in each trial, and then you need to define how you'd like the participants to respond. So you have different options here: pressing keys, clicking buttons, typing. Let's go as well with pressing keys. These are the keys that are enabled: A, S, and D. We can select 1 and 0, or whatever we want from the keyboard. If we are to select buttons, then we need to define the labels, and depending on how many labels we have here, that's how many buttons you will have on the screen. So if I have only left, then it's going to be a single button, not much of a choice for participants. So probably that's going to be quite rare that you want to have that. But let's say you have left, right, up, down, then you're going to have 4 buttons printed on the screen. So let's start with the pressing keys, but I'll demonstrate also how the buttons look like. You can define a correct response, and you can say whether the participants should receive feedback after every trial or not. That's it about trial definition. Then you specify how many screens you'd like with instructions, how many practice trials, and how many main trials. I'm going to make a very short experiment first with only 5 main trials. Some of this information was also presented during the getting started with Testable. So I will go quite quickly through it, but bear with me. Maybe there is an overlap of 5 minutes, not more than that. And then we'll go for more advanced features in Testable, features that you can use for your experiments. Let's select also randomizations for trials, and that's it. Then you click on Generate Project. Once you generated the project, you will be presented with the next steps here. So the fact that you can find the experiment under project, how you can modify the experiment, that you should access the trial file, the single most important thing about any testable experiment. That's a spreadsheet where information about every trials is specified. And also, if you need more advanced options, that you should check the manual that is available here at this link. So let's click on done. We have the experiment created here, quick project 1. That's the link where the experiment is available. If I click on that link now, you will see the experiment up and running. It's going to feature the default text that we have and the default images that we have. So obviously, you'll need to go into the trial file and modify that. But just for demonstration purposes, after this calibration screen, we have the screen instructions, the instruction screen, title for instructions, content for instructions, button, next, and then we have the stimuli. Remember, 2 images per trial, right? So we had image 1 for 1 second, image 2 for 1 second, 500 milliseconds in between, and now on the screen, only this text remains, the instructions that we have for every trial. So if I press on 1, I move to the next trial, again, image 1, 1 second, then 500 milliseconds interstimulus interval, and image 2 for 2 seconds, for 1 second. Again, then this is the 3rd trial. I press again, this is the 4th trial, and I press again, this is the 5th trial. Okay, and that's it. We have the results saved, everything is fine. So let's see how we can edit that, how we can modify it, how we can make it our own. So as I said, that's the most important thing for a testable experiment, the trial file. So you click on the trial file, you download the trial file CSV, the spreadsheet, and let's see how this one looks like. So we have 1 row per trial, basically. You will see we asked for an instruction screen, which is here. On this instruction screen, we can define the title for instructions under column title and the content under column content. So let's say my first experiment this is for you to detect any changes, let's say. We can also customize the text that appears in the buttons, let's say start, and then we move to the main trials. So the type of these trials is test. Note that we have this column here, type. That's the only required column that we have in the spreadsheet. So you must define what kind of trial, what kind of row you define every time. So that's an instructions trial, and these are tests or trials for which we expect an answer from the participants. So in this one, we have 2 stimuli per trial, image 1 and image 2. These are the default file names of the images that we have, image1.jpg and image2.jpg. If you want to present a different image here, you modify this to reflect the file name of the image that you want to present. So if you have an image of London, let's say, you want to present an image of London and an image of Paris, let's say. So, and they are called london.jpg and paris.jpg. So you would need to have here London and then Paris. Make sure that the images or the stimuli that you define here are also uploaded to this space stimuli. Because if you define something in the trial file and you haven't uploaded the stimuli to testable, this is what happens. So I save this and I try to upload it. So you will see that I get a warning now. And it says stimuli files are missing, london.jpg and paris.jpg, and the experiment doesn't run. If I want to run this experiment, you'll see the experiment can't run. Please check the error here. Okay, so that's to prevent incomplete experiments from running. So we always check that the stimuli that you define in the trial file do exist and you uploaded them to testable. Okay, let's go back to our default images, image 1 and image 2, because that's the these are the ones that we have. Then the next column is ITI, that's the intertrial interval. So what's the delay in between trials? 800 milliseconds. All the times are specified in milliseconds in testable. Then we have the STIM format. That's where we define the type of the stimuli that we want to present in our experiment. So in this case, it's JPEG that assumes that assumes images, or that means images. If I change this Steam format to MP3, that's how easy it is to tell the program that you want to present audio files now. And you have to make sure again that this stimuli here exist. So image1.mp3 should exist in your stimuli, and then Testable is going to play that. If you want to present videos, you probably can infer you need MP4. These are the only formats that we accept for sounds and for videos so far, MP3 and MP4. So you need to make sure that you convert your audio video files into MP3 and MP4. You can also present words or text on the screen. And in this case, you need to have word. So if I put word here, then these words will appear on the screen. And they can be simple words, and then they will be presented as stimuli, let's say, but can be also very, very long sentences, scenarios, for example. So you can have a long text here in Stim1, and you're going to have the scenario as a single stimulus, let's say, presented in this experiment. Okay, so let's go with 2 trials with words just to show you the difference. Okay. Then title content, we've seen that. Button 1, we've seen that. Then we have keyboard. So these are the keys that are enabled, 1 and 0. You can also modify the trial file and add some other responses. So if you want QWE, for example, to be enabled, you can do that. You can also add multiple response types. So let's say that you want the keyboard enabled, but you also want to present some buttons on the screen. So in this case, and you want to present 2 buttons. So what do? You have button 1, okay, that's fine, but you need to define it in order for the program to know that it should be on the screen. So let's say left, that's an option. And then you need to define button 2 as well, right. So in this case, you will see 2 words, image 1 and image 2. Let's modify them and say, let's say dog and cat, okay? Let's have the same here. And let's have left and right. So in this case, the participants can respond by clicking on the buttons, left or right, or by pressing the keys 1 or 0, okay? And then we have presentation time, 1000 times 2, that means 1000 milliseconds for each screen, for each stimulus. Remember, that's a sequential presentation. And then we have the interstimulus interval, 500 times 1, basically 500. Can also have it like that. So that's how Testable knows if you want to have a sequential presentation of stimuli or a simultaneous presentation of stimuli. Every time you have the same, every trial where you don't have any ISI defined, that's a simultaneous presentation of stimuli, right? No interstimulus interval. If you have something defined here under the ISI, Testable assumes or infers it's a sequential presentation. If you have 1 ISI, that means you want 2 screens. If you have 2 ISIs with semicolon, like that, that means 3 screens, right? So the number of screens is the number of ISIs that you define here plus 1. Okay, so that's it. Trial text to appear on each trial. Let's say, which one do you prefer? Let's have this. Which one do you prefer? Let's have this as the question for the participant, and that should be the instructions for every trial. And then you can define the key, that's the correct response. Let's say that the correct response is 1 in all the cases. Also presentation times, let's try something else. Let's have nothing here. So in this case, if no presentation time is defined, that means that we have the stimuli on the screen. We'll have the stimuli on the screen for unlimited time. Okay, and column random. This is the column used to randomize the trials. So any set of consecutive trials having the same number here will be randomized. We'll have the trials randomized. So all these 5 trials will be randomized in this case. It doesn't matter if it's 1 or can be any number, as long as it's the same number, the consecutive trials will be randomized. Note that if I have 1, 1, 1, only these 3 trials are consecutive. Only these 3 consecutive trials have the same number. So only these 3 will be randomized, and then these 2 will be randomized separately. So first we will see these little trials, these 3 trials randomized within, and then we'll see these trials randomized within. Okay, so let's save this for now to see all the changes that we've done and how they are reflected. I'm going to upload it, the trial file, and then I'm going to run the experiment, show you how it looks like, and then I can see some questions. So I'm going to try to address those questions. So we access again the experiment link. We have the calibration screen. So every time there is a visual stimulus, Testable automatically adds a calibration screen. Participants are asked to adjust the line, the length of this line, to match the length of a standard debit card, credit card, to make sure that all stimuli are presented in the same size. You can get rid of this calibration screen. I will show you immediately how. Okay, instruction screen, my first experiment. This is for you to detect any changes. The instructions don't reflect actually what we have in the experiment, but that's just for illustration purposes. And then we have the button start, right? Okay, if we press on start, which one do we prefer? That's the trial text. Remember what we had here? And then we have dog and cat. These are words. These are our stimuli, STIM1 and STIM2, presented. Remember, Testable by default centers all the stimuli vertically and horizontally to help you. So you don't need to do anything, because in most cases, that's what you want, centered stimuli. If you have 2, they are also centered. If you have 3, they are centered. If you have 1, it's going to be in the middle of the screen, and so on. And then we have also the buttons that we define, left and right. So I can click on any of these, or I can press key 1 or key 0, whatever I want. So let's press on left. Again, we do that. Then we have image 1 and image 2. That's another of these first 3 trials. Remember that these are randomized. The randomization works such that it was not immediately obvious. We'll see in the results whether these 2 were randomized. Okay, so 1 or 0. Then we go to the next one, and then we go to the next one. So that's the experiment. Let's have a quick look at the results. For every participant, there is 1 results file saved in CSV. The naming convention goes like that. The first 6 digits are the code of the experiment, and they reflect this code here from the link. Then we have the year, month, day, hour, minute, second. If we record the participant ID, then that's going to be appended as well to the name. So if we download such a results file, this is how it looks like. Wait a second. Okay, here. So first we have information about the local machine running the experiment. So the browser version, screen resolution, operating system, GMT timestamp, local timestamp, the link where the experiment was accessed, and the calibration factor. Remember that I made the line a bit shorter, so that's why I have this below one here. So then we have the same information that we had in the trial file, plus a few extra columns added. The first column is row number. So this is important, especially when we have randomization, right? Because we want to know the order in which the trials were presented. So remember that in our trial file, actually, I just realized something. So probably that's one of the questions. I haven't shared my whole desktop. Okay, let me just share this. Probably that was one of the complaints that that you had, that you cannot see my screen on the trial file. Okay, let me share everything, the whole desktop. Okay, so now it should be better. Okay, I'm gonna rewind a bit and go back to the trial file. Hopefully that's fine and you can catch up. So this is how the trial file looks like. We have one trial per row. The first one is for instruction screen, and then we have 5 trials, the test trials. Okay. This is where I said that we modify the names. So we have Stim1 and Stim2, dog and cat, instead of image1 and image2. And this is the Stim format, the column where we specify the format of our stimuli. So that's where I said that we can have MP3. So if we plan to present audio files, we have a MP3. If we plan to present video files, we can have MP4. But we need to make sure that we get these files available in stimuli so that we upload them to Testable, yeah? Dog MP4, for example, in this case. But for the experiment that I ran, we went for Word. And then this is where I modified the title of the experiment, my first experiment, and the content. This is for you to detect any changes. That's where I modified the buttons and the text of the buttons and the options. So in this case, I added button 2, and Testable prints 2 buttons on the screen because that's what we have defined here. So left and right, what you have seen. This is the column for specifying the keys that should be enabled, 1 and 0. Then we have the column with the presentation time. Then we have the column with the interstimulus interval. Then we have the column with the trial text, the text that appears on each trial. And then we have the keys. These are the correct responses for the trials. And that's the column for randomization. As I said, any set of consecutive trials having the same number will be randomized. In this case, the first 3 trials, and then we'll see these 2 trials in a randomized order. And now going to the results file. So the first results file be already open here. Okay. So at the top of the screen, we have information about the local machine, how I said, and then the same information that we have in the trial file, plus this column here, the row number. So that's the position of that trial in the original trial file. So first we saw the trial in row 3, this one. Okay. Then we saw the trial in row 4. Then we saw the trial in row 5. So by chance, it happened that that was the order, exactly the order that was in the trial file of these 3 files. But then we also had these trials randomized, and in this case, the order changed. So you see, we first saw the trial in row 7, and then the trial in row 6. Okay, and then we have also these columns added at the end of the trial file, of the results file. Timestamp, that's milliseconds from the start of the experiment. Then we have the actual response that was given by the participant. Then we have the response time in milliseconds again, and computation of whether the response was correct or not. That's just comparing this with the column key. So whenever there is a match, that's going to be 1, correct. When there is no match, it's going to be a 0, so incorrect response. So that's about it for the results file. Let me quickly stop sharing for a second so that I can check the questions that you addressed me without revealing your identity. Okay, perfect. So yeah, the questions were actually about the trial file, that you cannot see the trial file. So that was already addressed. Feel free to ask me any questions, and also to suggest the type of experiments that you'd like to create with Testable, and to ask how you can create those experiments. Okay, so I'm sharing again. Okay, also in the chat, I see some comments, but hopefully that's fine now. I didn't enable sharing of the whole screen, so you couldn't see the trial file, but I think now everything is fine. Okay, sorry about that again. Apologies. Hopefully you could follow, or at least you could catch up after I shared the screen. All right, so let me share again everything. Okay, just a second. Okay, enter full screen, and then share screen again. And oops, I don't want to do that. First, I want to, sorry, just hiding the chat screen. Close. Perfect. And then I can share. Okay, perfect. So back to Testable. Let me show you some other things that you can define for the projects in the setup, and then I will show you the different types of experiments and how complex the experiments can get in Testable to demonstrate that you can do very, very complex experiments in Testable. So in setup, you can define a few options. So if you access setup, you can change the project name. You can choose the language of your experiment. You have the options of French, Dutch, Hebrew, Mandarin, Farsi. You can protect your experiment with a password, so only participants who have that password can participate. You can enable advanced randomization. You can read here more about that. You can enable a progress bar for participants to know exactly where they are in the experiment. You can change the screen background color, the text background color, the text color. You can require a full screen. Let's check that so that I can show you. You can add a consent page. In this case, you need to upload the consent form to show to participants. Make sure you do that here. You can also ask for some information from participants. So let's say you want from them ID, age, sex, and that's it. You can define your own labels if you want as well. And the general instruction screen. What kind of information to record from the local machine, operating system, web browser, screen size. You can also record the whole experiment, have an audio recording of the whole experiment. Make sure for very long experiments, it's going to be large files that need to be uploaded at the end of the experiment. So you should allow for that. You can record the frame rate throughout the experiment, and you can specify where to save the results in the cloud or locally or both. Okay, so let's save that for now. Then the other interesting thing you can define refers to the audience. So here in the audience, you can define, you can restrict participation to one participation per IP. You can protect against bots with a reCAPTCHA at the start. You can define the number of maximum participants. If you have between subjects experiments, you can ensure even allocation to the different groups that you defined. You can filter participants by country, and you just select the countries where you want your experiment to be available. You can also select the devices, operating systems, and the browsers on which your experiment should run. Okay, you can check all these options. Hopefully they are self-explanatory. So the most interesting thing now is to go back to the experiment and see the different things that we can do with Testable. Again, please ask me about specific experiments that you have in mind, and I will try to be also specific in my responses to tell you if you can do that with Testable, and if you can do it, how you should do it. Very quickly, to tell you that you can find all information about Testable in the manual here, top right. You can search all the columns, all the attributes that are available, and you can easily find also how you should use those columns. As well, to the left menu here, you have the Help Center. You have also a community. You can ask other users or us. Sometimes we answer the questions as well there. And if none of this work, you can also chat with us, or you can send us a message by accessing this little widget here, lower right part of the screen. Okay, so let's go back to the trial file. And this is the results file. So trial file, let's try to demonstrate some of the other options, okay? So we've seen randomization. Let's say that now we want to present feedback for participants, right, according to their response. So there's a column that is called feedback. If I type in some text here, let's say, well done. This text will appear after every trial, regardless of the response. But maybe you want to modify that feedback according to whether the response was correct or not, right? So in this case, you write correct, and then you say, well done. And then with semicolon, you can have another option for incorrect responses. Let's say, try again. Okay. You can also have feedback according to the response that you give in an experiment. So in this one, let's say you can press 1 or 0, right? So you can specify a response for 1 and another response for 0. So for 1, you say you pressed 1, and for 0, you can say you pressed 0. Oops. Okay, so we'll try that. Let's get rid of the presentation time here and of ISI so that it's easier to follow. Look how I just delete information from here. I can do that, or I can also delete the whole column. It doesn't matter. Also, the order of the columns doesn't matter. So it's quite flexible how you present the information in the trial file. We can also get rid of the buttons, for example. So now we can only press 1 and 0. So let's see how this looks like. Or let's add some other things. Let's get rid of the randomization so that you can follow these 3 options first. Okay, so now the trials are not randomized. So they will follow exactly this order. So I'm going to upload this trial file, and then I will check some of your questions again. Okay. Right. So I need to access the link again. This trial file is also a great way to have a complete overview of your experiment, right? So that's why it's very useful, not only for how easy it is to create an experiment with it, but also to have an overview of the experiment. You can immediately see what your experiment is about. So start full screen, because that's what we selected. That was the general instruction screen. This is the calibration screen. We are asking for some information, let's say Costi, whatever, 32 male. This is the information. And then my first experiment, this is for you to detect any changes. And then remember, which one do you prefer, dog or cat? Now I press 1, and it was well done for any response, the feedback, if you remember. The next one for correct is well done, for incorrect is try again. Incorrect is 0, so I will try that. Try again. And now, depending on what I press, it's going to show me what I press. So I'm going to press 1. So you said you pressed 1. Okay, so that's how the feedback works. I'm going to stop the share just for a second again, so that I can look at the questions and not reveal your identities. Okay. Questions. Can we have 2 different types of stimuli on one trial? For example, image and sound. Yes, I'm going to show you immediately. And the other question, very similar to this one. Amazing. And then, is there any limit to the number of rows trials you can include in an experiment? No, you can have unlimited trials. As many trials as the CSV program allows, which I think is hundreds of thousands. I'm not sure about that number. So let me show you how you can present multiple stimuli at the same time. And then I had another question. I'm planning on doing a sandwich mask priming with word stimuli. Is it possible with Testable? Can you give me a bit more details what you mean by that? So you want to present 2 words sequentially separated by a mask? If you could confirm if that's what you want, I can also address this question. Okay, so let's close this and this one and share the screen again. Okay, and I'm gonna show you now how you can present visual and audio at the same time. So what you need to do in this case is to add a column that is called audio. So you can add an audio file to words, to images, or to videos, unless the videos already have files, in which case have a sound, in which case it doesn't make much sense. That's how you can combine multiple stimuli. So just adding an audio to a visual stimulus. To do that, you just specify the name of the file here. So whatever you specify here, and you need to include the extension in this case, whatever you specify here, it's going to play at the same time with the visual stimuli, which can be the words or the images. I cannot demonstrate it live because you will not be able to hear the sound through this webinar. It's in my headphones only, but that's how it works. And yeah, it definitely works. So just add the audio file in there. Hope that is clear. Okay, so let's try some other options here, apart from feedback, other options which may be interesting. So let me tell you a bit more about randomization. Not in full details, because we'll have a separate webinar for that, dedicated only to randomization, because you can get very, very complex randomization in Testable. You can basically achieve anything you want with randomization. So we have two columns for randomization, random and random block, which, as you can imagine, refers to block randomization. So here we can mark different blocks that we want randomized. So if we have something like that, we mark these trials as belonging to block 1 and these trials as belonging to block 2. In this case, one of these two blocks will be presented first. So either these trials or these trials. Okay, easy enough. If I also have one here, I can have one everywhere. So either this block or this block will be presented first. Within each of these blocks, the trials will also be randomized. For block randomization, I can also have levels. So I can have sub-blocks, let's say, which I write like this. So let's say that I have that, okay? And 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, and 2, 2, let's say, and again 2, 2. So we have two large blocks now, 1 and 2. One of these will be presented first. Then within each large block, we have two smaller blocks. That's the second digit after the first one. So we have this smaller block here and this smaller block here. So one of these two will be presented first within the larger block, and one of these two will be presented first within the larger block number 2. And then within them, because we have 1, 1 here, also the trials will be randomized. You can have an unlimited number of an unlimited number of levels defined here in block randomization. So that's why you can get to super advanced randomization, and you can make it as granular as you need it to be. Again, if you're interested in randomization and very complex randomization, you should attend the seminar dedicated to randomization. Let's finish with the random options. You can also have random pick. So this column is for those situations in which you have a large number of trials, but you only want to present a subsample of the available trials to one participant. So whenever you have a set of consecutive trials having the same number there, the program will look for that number of trials and present only. So in this case, we have in total 10 trials, but we have 5 here. That means that the program will randomly select 5 trials from within this 10 and only present those 5. Okay? If you have between subjects experiments, then you use column subject group. And it works very similar to the other columns that I've just shown you. So you can mark the trials which belong to group 1, trials which belong to group 2, let's say, and trials which belong to group 3. Note that we also have some trials or instructions which don't have anything here. That means that they will be presented to all the groups. They apply to all groups. So at the start of the experiment, one participant will be assigned to one of these 3 groups. And that participant will see only the common trials, so not having anything here, and the trials marked as belonging to that group. So if you're in group 1, that's what you see. If you're in group 2, you see the instructions and then these trials. Okay? You can have multiple sets of subject groups as well. So let's say in the first half of your experiment, you want to have 2 groups, and in the second part of your experiment, you want to have 4 groups. Okay, you can do that in Testable. It's only that you need to assign some labels in front so that we know that you have different sets of groups. So let's say the first set is A, and then you need to start like that, A1, and then mark everything like that. You can write A1 for the next one, so just leave it 1. We are just going to assume that it's going to be that these ones belong to set A as well. And then let's say you have B1 here, and B2 and B3. Okay, so in this case, we have a first branching here, let's say. So half of the participants will see A1 and half of participants will see A2. And then when this is done, we have another branching. All participants will be split into 3 groups. One group will see this trial, another group will see this trial, and the third group will see this trial. The splitting here is completely independent from the splitting here. Okay, so that's for the subject group. All right. Other options which may be interesting for demonstrating refer to the different response types, right? Okay, that's very important. So far we've only seen the keyboard, okay? Let's start with the most basic one, which is nothing defined. So in this case, we present this, 2 stimuli on the screen. We have no responses defined. Testable tries to make it as easy as possible for you, and we have default options for everything. So in case you have 2 stimuli and you have nothing defined as response, we assume that the desired response is clicking on the stimuli because you haven't defined anything. So if I save this one now, just to show you how it works, and well, let's have different options, and then I can demonstrate all of them at once. Okay, so that's clicking on the stimuli, yeah, for the first one. Then let's say that we define some buttons, left and right. So in this case, these are going to be my response options. Then I can define keyboard like we've seen, but let's define something else. Let's define left and right. So this refers to the left and right arrow, okay? Then I can specify other types of responses with response type here. Let's say that I want and let's also vary the number of the stimuli. So, okay, let's have 2 stimuli first, and then let's have only 1 stimulus. And let's say that I want a slider. That's going to show a slider. I can define how the slider should look like, or I can go with the default option. The default option is to have a slider between 0 and 100 in steps of 1. If I want to modify that, let's do it in the following trial, slider. Let's say I want a Likert scale between 1 and 7. So I'm going to write it like that. I can also define labels for the slider. So I can have something like slider, bad, average, good. So in this case, I'm just going to have these 3 options, and I can select between these 3 options from the slider. Okay. All right. What are the response types you can have in the experiments? You can click on the word, on the images. So you can, let's do it for the images. So you can have clicks here, and then pixel. That means that it's going to record the location where you clicked on that particular image. You can also impose a grid of cells. Let's say grid 10 by 10. So in this case, I will have a grid 10 by 10 imposed on top of image 1, and then the response or the program is going to tell me on which cell I clicked from this grid. Okay, so quite a lot of stuff. Let's upload the trial file and try to see how all these responses look like. Okay. So we re-upload. Start full screen. Okay. That's the general instruction screen. Calibration, participant information. Just gonna put here, I'm doing my first experiment. Which one do you prefer, dog or cat? See that now the only response that is available is clicking. So I need to go with my cursor on top of the stimuli and click on them. Then the next response was with the buttons. These are the buttons that I defined. I don't remember what was the third response, so let's check in the trial file. So, okay, the keyboard, left and right. So if I press left, I go to the next one. Then we have the slider by default, so that's the slider. Then we have the slider from 1 to 7 that we defined. Okay. Then we have the slider defined with the labels, bad, average, good. And then we have clicking on the image. So that's going to show the location in pixel where we clicked. And then we have again clicking on the image, but this time it's going to record the grid cell where I clicked on that image. And this one is the default response when there is a single stimulus on the screen and no response is defined. Let's say good. Okay. So this is how it works. These are the response options. For a full set of the response options, you can go into the menu. Let me quickly show. And you find here columns to define responses. Page 9. If you go to page 9, you get all the information that you need. Okay, which is here. So you can have box, you can have multiple boxes. So let's say that you want 3 boxes for the same trial. You put box times 3. You can have comment labels as well. So you can print, you can display a number of labels below the images, and then the participants can drag the labels on top of the images to assign different labels. Clicks we've seen, and then mic, so that's for voice responses. We can also have voice responses on your experiments, and you can record the voice response. If that's what you selected, the participants will go through sound calibration or voice calibration part at the start of the experiment. Keyboard, buttons, we've seen that, and also you have different options, response options that you can use according to the time, according to the type of the response that you chose. Okay. If there are any questions, if you want to see something else in more details, let me know, and I will try to address that. Okay, let's move to branching. So how do we incorporate conditions in our experiments? So we need columns, 2 columns, which are called if and then. I'm gonna delete that. So if and then. Here we specify the condition, and here we specify the action. Let me delete some of these columns so that we can see all the information on the same screen. So let's say, and let's have the response with keyboard for illustration purposes. Oops, I didn't write it correctly. So, and let's say that we have all the keys from 0 to 1. Okay, these are the responses that we require in every trial. Okay. So, if 1, then 5. What does it mean? If I press 1, if that's the response, then take me to the trial found in row 5. I can also have an else, let's say 6. So if the response is 1, go to 5, else go to 6. I can also have multiple conditions here with semicolons as well. So let's say have something like that. So if response is 1, go to trial in row 5. If response is 2, go to trial in row 6. If 3, go to trial in row 7, else go to trial in row 8. You can also define the action without having to remember or to make sure that the trials are in the row where you specify and so on. You can assign labels to the different trials. So let's say that this trial here is called here. That's the label. So instead of specifying the number, you can say go here. So if 1, go here. If this is not fulfilled, this condition, nothing happens, right? So you'll just go to the next trial. Okay. You can also specify the action in relative terms. According to the current position. So you can say go +2. That means go 2 trials forward. Or you can have -2, go 2 trials back. Or you can also have something like that. So under if, it's you can have not only the responses, but also whether it was correct or not. So let's say if incorrect, you can use these labels. If incorrect, then 0. That means if incorrect, stay on this trial and repeat this trial until you get it correct, basically. Or you can add if incorrect 0, if correct, you can have +2, meaning if correct, you jump 2 trials forward. Okay. Not only that, you can also use RT. So you can say if RT less than 100. So that's going to work. If you respond really, really quickly, go 4 trials forward, something like that. And you can have conjunctions of conditions. So if 2, let's say, response is 2 and RT less than 100, then go 4 trials forward. So again, it can get really, really complex in terms of how you define the branching here and the conditions and how you want to define the flow of the experiment depending on how participants respond during the experiment. Okay. I guess there's some more questions. So let me quickly stop share and look at the questions. Okay. So these are responses. This was addressed as well without even seeing it, so that's fine. And then maybe one more question. Okay, so more details about the sandwich mask priming experiment. Fixation point, yeah, let me show you how you can present the fixation cross. Okay, yeah, so again, let me share the screen. All right, so fixation is in a column that is called fixation. And you can define where to show the fixation. So let's say ITI, that means so show the fixation during the ITI, which is the intertrial interval right at the start of the trial. So it's going to be a fixation cross for 800 milliseconds here. You can also keep the fixation on top of the stimuli if you want, or when the stimuli are shown, and then you say with stim. So it's going to be a fixation during the ITI, but then also with the stim. Or you can have a fixation after stim if you want. You can use this label as well. Okay, so let's go for that. And then you'll see how that works. And then for the priming experiment with the words, yes, you need a sequential presentation, right? So you will need an interstimulus interval defined, let's say 500 milliseconds, and a presentation time defined for the 2 screens. So let's say you want the first word to be presented for 300 milliseconds and the second one for 300 milliseconds. And then that's how you can implement the experiment that you wanted. Okay. Then let me quickly go through the manual to see if I forgot something important to mention about the different options that that we offer. So trial text, you've seen fixation. These are all the labels that you can use. So you can have a fixation during the ISI as well, or throughout the trial, you can use all trial. Okay, trial text options, positioning, feedback, timer. Okay, so you can have a timer top right of the screen as well, if you want to add that. So let's have it here. Let's say timer, and then you need to define in again in milliseconds. So let's say you want 10 seconds. And then when you define a timer, you may also want to define a limited response window for participants. So if they respond within 10 seconds, let's say, then good. If not, move forward to the next trial and don't expect for an answer anymore. So you can define this response window here. And let's match it to the timer. But they can be independent. So you can have 5,000 here. It's going to come to 0. It's going to get to 0. But then for another 5 seconds, participants would still be able to respond. But let's make it like that here. So save. Let's do it with the images because I think they are better illustrated for this webinar. So let's put JPEG here. Let's re-upload the trial file. And the experiment. Start full screen. Calibration. Okay, we should have got rid of that. And then we see image 1, image 2 for 500 milliseconds, and then I get 10 seconds for the response. If I don't provide the response within 10 seconds, then the experiment should automatically progress to the next trial. Okay, let's see. Oh, was it the first trial or, oh, it's in the second trial actually. That's why I was waiting and nothing was happening. So I'm pressing, I see the fixation, right, because we also needed the timer in this trial. So you see the timer here, top right. So when it's going to get to 0, I don't do anything, but still the trial is going to move to the next one because there is no response provided by the participant. Okay, so I hope I managed to illustrate some of the most commonly used options in Testable and what you can do with Testable. Again, don't forget about all the resources that you have. The most complete one is the manual, and you can use a simple search, Control F here, to look for different information. Then you have the Help Center, you have the community, and you have the Help button here. You can just email us and ask for information. If there are no more questions, and I think I'm up to date with the questions, yes, then thanks so much for attending this webinar, and I hope it was useful, and hope to see you to the next webinar. Bye-bye.